Welcome back, folks. Episode 6 of the True Money Podcast. What we will cover in this episode is the claim that Bitcoin is digital gold. And we'll look at the reasons why that claim is easily proven to be false. Bitcoin is nothing like gold at all in respect of the functions and the purpose of money that matters, and that is purchasing power expectations. So we'll have a look at that later on in this episode. What I want to do is start off by looking at the quote from Satoshi that we had a look at in episode 5. Because I've looked into this quote from Satoshi since the last episode, and in fact, it's even worse for the Bitcoin argument than I had assumed. If you remember from episode 5, I spoke about how simply adding on zeros and breaking a Bitcoin up into smaller and smaller units does absolutely nothing to satisfy the need for an elastic supply. It does nothing to anchor purchasing power expectations. It's actually even worse than that, because if we see what Satoshi has written, and I'll just read some of it out. He states here there are 6 decimal places that aren't shown for a total of 8 decimal places internally. It shows 1.00. So this is a comment from February 2010. So the Bitcoin project was in its infancy, and I'm assuming, because Satoshi has said so, that at this stage of the project, the graphical user interface for Bitcoin only showed 3 digits, a unit and 2 subunits, so 1.00 according to Satoshi. So what he has said here is that the maximum number of units that can be shown for Bitcoin is 1 and then 8 zeros, and that is as it exists today. So that is not infinite. That is not, this claim that we looked at previously from Bitcoiners that it's infinitely divisible. Well, it's not, because it's only 8 decimal places. So that is very much fixed. So this claim of infinite divisibility has to be said that it's complete nonsense. It's just a lie, and it's an insidious lie. And if you remember, we looked at the quote from the Bitcoin Standard. I have to say, I don't know where this lie originated from, that it's infinitely divisible, but certainly Saifedean wrote it in his book. And if you remember, Saifedean claims that the Austrian school made this comment, which they didn't. So this claim that Bitcoin's infinitely divisible, complete nonsense. It's a complete lie. There is 8 decimal places, basically 100 million Satoshis in any Bitcoin unit, and then of course 21 million Bitcoin units. So where Satoshi says in this example from the forum post from February 2010, if there's massive deflation in the future, the software could show more decimal places. He was only talking about showing more decimal places other than the 2 that are shown at that time. There were 1.00, so 2 decimal places shown. He was simply suggesting that they can show up to 8, which of course the most graphical user interfaces for Bitcoin will show the full 8 at this point. But in order to show even more, that would require, and I've confirmed this via searching on the forum myself, that would require a consensus change to the Bitcoin protocol and a hard fork. So essentially, if you wanted to, or if anybody wanted to continue breaking smaller units, that would be a hard fork of Bitcoin, and these hard forks are not easily done, and they introduce significant risk into the project anytime a hard fork is undertaken. I just wanted to cover this because it really is important. This claim that Bitcoin's infinitely divisible is clearly untrue. In order to add on any more zeros, there would need to be a consensus change to do that, and then if there were a need to add on any more zeros at a further point in time, it would require a further consensus change. So while it would be possible to continue breaking the unit up into smaller and smaller pieces by adding more zeros. It requires a change to do that, a change to the software. Let's move on and have a look at how this argument is sometimes presented, and we'll look at it a little bit more closely. So what we have on screen now is just an elaboration of Satoshi and, it seems, Saifedean's interpretation of this breaking money units up into ever smaller pieces. And this is from Twitter X, and I'll not include the chap's name in it. I did get into a bit of a debate with him about it, but I don't think it's fair to put his name on here because he can't respond directly. Of course, although I'm happy to have a debate with any Bitcoiner on this topic of the Bitcoin's fixed limit. Makes it entirely unsuitable. In fact, it rules them out. It rules Bitcoin out as being money. A fixed limit money is impossible. And what this chap has said about it here, bizarre. They claim that a fixed money supply is perfectly elastic, which is just utter nonsense. And you can see that they claim that anyone that raises this as a concern is a Keynesian, which of course is incorrect, because we covered very clearly that Friedrich Hayek raised this as an issue. Friedrich Hayek stated in his book, The Denationalization of Money, that the money must possess considerable elasticity in order to make the volume of the money stream behave in the desired manner. And whenever we look at that through the topics that we've covered in this episode so far, that would be the velocity of money. And Friedrich Hayek was referring to the variable M, the supply of money that we've just looked at. It needs to be flexible in order to combat inflation and deflation in the economy. Let's continue to look at this example. 10 Bitcoins in an economy, you can buy 10 Ferraris, but later on that year you can buy 20 Ferraris instead. And that in this scenario, I'm just skipping down to the bottom, I'm not going to read the whole thing out. That because the purchasing power has increased, it can be spent elsewhere in the economy, therefore it's perfectly elastic, which is just utter nonsense. There's no reference here about production problems, and we know that we've just looked at it. When the velocity starts to reduce, as this example admits, somebody is holding off on buying a Ferrari now. They're going to wait until later because they can buy more Ferraris or they can get it for cheaper. So that is hoarding. And that begins the deflationary cycle. That is the whole purpose of our discussion in this episode. And this argument from Satoshi, from Saifedean, from I think Parker Lewis and the other chap who's put this post up here, it's completely nonsensical. It fails on the face of it. A fixed money supply is perfectly elastic. No, it isn't. It's fixed. It's the money is issued on a rigid schedule, and it will stop in the future, and that will cause a panic, of course, as Hayek confirmed. Let's read on down at the bottom here. So the person that has money left over because they didn't spend it previously, the purchasing power increased now that they can buy whatever they wanted in the first place, the Ferrari, and they have money left over that they will now spend into the economy, and that effectively fulfills the need of elasticity. So there are a number of mistakes with this. Firstly, it's a complete misunderstanding of what it means to have an elastic money supply, but the biggest mistake is around human behaviour and misunderstanding purchasing power increases and expectations of future purchasing power increases. The argument starts off by saying, a holder of money will simply hold their money for a time period in that they can buy more with it later. But all of a sudden they're happy to spend it all in the economy, as per the ending paragraph in the argument. And it's an example of a typical Bitcoiner argument where they cannot even keep their logic straight. throughout their own argument. So in the first instance, yes, purchasing power increases, so the holder of the money will benefit from purchasing power increase. Then at some point in the future they will be happy to spend it all. And of course, in a real world application of a fixed limit money, you won't be able to just go onto an exchange and buy more of the fixed limit money, as folks can spend their Bitcoin today if they like and go to an exchange and buy more Bitcoin. And of course that's because Bitcoin is a token within an overarching fiat money system. If it were money, you're not going to be able to replenish your money supply by going to an exchange. What would you buy it with? Fiat currency doesn't exist. Bitcoin is money. You would have to earn Bitcoin through investments, through working, or by running a business. As we've seen already, the PQ side of the economy, prices and production trend towards zero when velocity begins to drop. So these arguments that the Bitcoiners make, this one in particular, can be totally disregarded. It's absolute nonsense. As far as I'm concerned, that puts that argument about infinite divisibility to bed. But Bitcoiners don't give up on these arguments. They will claim that they're correct, even though it's utter nonsense. And as we've shown in this episode, it's nonsense wrapped up in a lie. The lie that the Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. Well, it isn't under its current protocol. But let's draw a line under that and move on. What we're looking at on screen at the minute is just my own kind of graph, my own way to try and wrap up what we've been discussing in the past 2 episodes. So this goes back to episode 5 as well. If you haven't watched episode 5, you should go back and watch episode 5 so that you understand what you're looking at on screen right now. And it's a model of purchasing power expectations and how the purchasing power expectations change as the money issuance changes. I want to try and help as many people as possible understand this. So I thought, rather than pointing to previous economic writing or previous economic formulas, that I would try and put my own spin on it, try to pull it all together into an image that made sense to me, and maybe that will help it make sense to other folk as well. So I'll just talk you through what we're seeing on the screen, because I guess it could be quite busy. Starting over at the right hand side is the best place to start, because almost everybody understands what hyperinflation is. So if we look at the right hand side of this chart, we can see an area of price instability. So on the y-axis, we have got price stability on aggregate. So these are aggregate prices in a range from 0 to 1. So 0 price stability is completely unstable prices on aggregate, whereas 1 would be stable as we go to the top end of the y-axis. Looking at the x-axis, this is a model of money issuance from 0 to infinity. As we know, if currency units are issued at an infinite rate, that would cause hyperinflation and price instability. So this is modelled, obviously it's a normalised curve that we're looking at here. We know that if there's too much money issuance, then that causes hyperinflation at the top end. And if there is going to be a range of money issuance that causes inflation, a dilution of the currency, a dilution of purchasing power. I'll draw your attention to the top of the graph now, where I have labelled it purchasing power expectations, and this refers to the left, the right and the middle of the graph, where there is a stable area of money issuance that leaves purchasing power expectations to be anchored in the economy. And this doesn't have to be a rigid issuance. In fact, the long history of gold as money, which had a natural elasticity of supply, where purchasing power expectations and purchasing power itself remained fairly constant over very long horizons, because more gold would be dug out of the ground if its purchasing power increased. So, and that issuance was in and around 1.6. 2% per year. And actually, let's have a quick look at that now, so that makes more sense what I mean whenever I refer to this stable area of equilibrium as it relates to the gold supply. So what we see is a graph model showing the gold supply over a 100-year period. This image actually came from the Bitcoin standard, so I'm sure Safety won't mind me using it. But what does it mean? Well, I've drawn the green line on myself to show a kind of midpoint, but thinking about the supply of gold and how there would be peaks and troughs and how it balances out purchasing power over a long period of time, this is exactly what I expected to see. So whenever I noticed it in the Bitcoin Standard book while I was reading it, I just knew that I would refer to it in this series, because we can see here that, as the purchasing power of gold rises in any way, more efforts are going to be spent on mining. It makes it more economical to go out and explore for gold. It makes a better business case for mining capex to go and mine gold. And what is critical about this is that the supply of gold doesn't end. It doesn't have a known fixed limit, and that is what enables participants in the economy to have a long time horizon. And Safety makes a lot of this in his book about having I think he calls it a low time preference, but that was only enabled because of the mean reverting power of gold supply being not of a fixed limit clearly, and having a natural elasticity. So there would be absolutely no benefit to you as an individual in trying to hoard gold as money. Of course, things have been corrupted massively since 1933, but under a gold standard, without massive government meddling in that, the purchasing power could remain relatively constant over long time horizons, and that is in fact the definition of store of value of a money, that it maintains purchasing power over a long time horizon. And you can see that this supply that we have right on screen, it's not a fixed limit. Gold is around us in the Earth's core. As deep as we would want to dig, we will find gold there. We can find it in the waterways. Gold is all around us. It's just not economic to extract at its current prices from all of these different areas that we find it. It's usually only economic to extract in bigger deposits. But we can see very, very clearly here that Bitcoin is absolutely nothing like gold. So this whole digital gold narrative is really, really easily disproven. We will come back in a later video. I think the last video in this series I'll use as a more speculative video to try and dive into the question as to why these narratives have been allowed to propagate without serious challenge. But certainly this Bitcoin is digital gold, that is easily disproven, and one would have to question the motives of people that started this. So this stable area in green where money issuance, it could be in and around 1 to 2%, but that might differ depending on the particular economy at that time. But if we look at the most successful money that's ever been known, the gold standard, and that you could even trace that back to different implementations of gold. Of course, there's evidence of gold being used as money thousands of years ago, so it can't really be disputed that gold has the longevity, the longest history of money. And what we see here in the middle is this stable area where purchasing power expectations remain anchored. That is so critical. That is completely missing in Bitcoin. Bitcoin belongs on the very left-hand side of this chart. Even though it has not reached its limit of issuance just yet, it's 95% of the way there. At some point it will be a zero issuance. And a money of a zero issuance is impossible. And it's irrelevant that you can break it up into smaller and smaller pieces. That has got absolutely nothing to do with the purchasing power expectations of that money. That purchasing power expectations where money issuance is zero. You can see at the top left hand side I have written propensity to hoard belongs at the left hand side in this deflationary area, and this whole left hand side of this chart is completely ignored by Satoshi, by Safedine, by any other writer on this topic. We've seen that the Satoshi thought that the solution to a deflationary problem was breaking the money units up into smaller and smaller pieces, which is completely wrong. We've shown that in this episode. It does nothing to stabilise or anchor purchasing power expectations. And when you couple this really horrific mistake with how big Bitcoin has got today, with the fact that Satoshi didn't bother putting any of these arguments in a formal paper, it is highly suspicious. And the fact that the academic support for Bitcoin comes from a book that's meant for mass distribution. It's not a formal academic paper proving that a fixed limit money is possible, because that paper would fail because it's not possible. The fact that the scholarly credence comes from mass distributed writings where they're not rigorously challenged. Anybody can write anything they like in a book and have it distributed. But if you're going to write, some proof for something as big as the Bitcoin project, a new money system, the best, most perfect money system ever created that could be worth trillions of dollars, that needs a little bit more scrutiny than just some folks writing anything they please in a few mainstream media books. Let's wrap it up here, folks. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And hopefully you're enjoying the series so far. I'll see you back for the next one.